Hi, welcome to Job Club, Module 2. Today we're going to talk about master applications, resumes, and social media, how to use it. Master applications, we're going to discuss how to keep things on a centralized application so that you have access to your information no matter where you are to be able to fill out applications with employers. Resumes. We're going to talk about not only how to make a resume and have you build one, we're also going to talk to you about how to use it. And social media. Caution you on things that you shouldn't post and tell you things that you can post that might help you land a job. You should have received a master application from me to fill out in this module. The purpose of that master application is so that you can have access to your information to transfer to a real employment application. So this document that you're going to be working on today, you would need to carry with you every time you go to apply somewhere, because it's going to have everything that they will ask you on a real application. The master application consists of these sections: personal data, employment history data, personal reference data, educational background data, and disclosure data. These are the sections that we'll be discussing how to fill out next. So please grab your handout and be ready to fill it out as we go along. Personal data. You will notice that at the top of the page it says title and position that you're applying for. If you have a specific job goal in mind, writing it down will help you achieve that job goal. The next part is your name, followed by your social security number. The reason that that's there is so that you have access to your social security number should you get hired on the spot by an employer. An employer will need that information for what's called I-9 reporting as required by the federal government. Your address, your home phone, and make sure your voicemail is appropriate. Your cell phone, make sure once again your voicemail is appropriate. Think of yourself as an employer. What would you think if you were to call an applicant and you were to get a long voicemail message that had jokes in it, things of that nature? Do you think that that person would be a serious person to work for your company? So while you're in the application stage before you get a job, be sure to make sure that your voicemail is appropriate and professional sounding. Your email address, same thing there. Make sure it's a professional email address. Using your name followed by a number at Gmail or Yahoo or whatever service that you want to use would be appropriate. Things that would be inappropriate would be using vulgar language as the front part of the email address. Don't do that. Once again, you're trying to make a good impression on an employer. And while we're at it, here's another tip. You'll find as you start to apply for jobs that you're going to start getting junk mail from colleges, and you'll wonder, well, I never gave my email address to this school or that school. How did they do it? Well, when you apply for a job, a lot of times the prospective employer will sell your email address to a school. So get a second email address, one that you're going to use only for work. Make it professional sounding as we discussed earlier. And then that way, any junk email you get will go to that account and it won't interfere with your personal email address. After you get your job, you can shut that email address down. But while you're searching for a job, you need to check that email address every day. And the last thing that's on there is your driver's license number. A lot of jobs require people to be able to drive a company car. So a lot of applications have your driver's license number so that they can pull your driving record to make sure that you're not an insurance risk for them. Employment data. In this section of our master application, you need to list all the jobs that you've had where you received a paycheck where taxes were taken out of. The reason that you want to list all those jobs is that those jobs are ones that are easily verifiable by an employer. So in other words, if you worked for an employer and you got fired, don't skip putting it on the application, because the employers check to see if you're telling them the truth. Honesty is one of the main things that they're looking for in an employee. All an employer has to do is go to the tax office when they're paying their corporate taxes and pull your tax record to find out where you've worked in the past. And if you're skipping places on your application, they're going to want to know why. So when you write down your employment history data, write down the name of the employer, write down the employer's address, the title and position that you held, the salary, how much money you made, whether it was full-time, part-time, and the average hours per week. List the dates of employment, from and to. From would be when the employment started, your start date. To would be when the job ended. List the month and year. The reason for that is when you apply online, computers scan and calculate how much time you've spent on a job, and they can figure out how much experience you have from that time. List the duties that you had, the responsibilities, the things you did. List your supervisor's name, their phone number. Also, list the reason that you left. Now, I don't expect you to be able to recall all that information instantly. That's why we have the master application, because if you went into an employer to apply for a job, some of that information you're going to have to look up. So use the internet, if you need to fill in the blanks for that missing information. References. There's an important distinction between a professional reference and a personal reference. A professional reference is someone that you've done work for that can speak to your work ethic, your work habits, things of that nature. Personal references are generally people who know you. Now, employers are looking for professional references. If you have to put down a personal reference, make sure it's not a relative. And here's why. If you were an employer and a person handed you an application and the reference on it was a mom or a dad or a cousin, don't you think that reference would say anything they could about that person to keep them in a positive light, to help them move out of the house, so to speak? That's why relatives don't make good personal references. Try to keep them professional. Professional references are people that you've worked for, employers that you've worked for. A second good source of a professional reference would be teachers or guidance counselors. They've seen your schoolwork. They know what your work ethic is. They know what your work habits are. The third type of professional reference could be someone from the religious community, a rabbi, a priest, a minister. And the reason being is this: most people look at the religious community and understand that that person won't lie about the person they're talking about. So when putting down your references, try to get 3 professional. If not, make 2 professional and 1 personal. Write down their name, their relationship to you, whether they're professional or personal. Write down the address. Please list their work phone, home phone, or cell phone. The primary phone that would be used to contact this person to ask about your work habits. If you've got an email address for them, list it. Email is becoming more and more important as a communication tool. Please check your references before putting them down. And what I mean is this: ask your references if you can use them as a reference. And the reason being is this: the thing that will kill an application faster than anything is if an employer calls a reference and they're not expecting the call, so they let it go to voicemail, or they don't answer it, or if they do answer it, they're rude to the other person because they weren't expecting the call. All of those kill your chances of getting a job. And if you simply ask the person if you can use them for a reference, then they can be expecting the call. The second thing to consider is have a friend that your reference doesn't know. Call them and act as an employer and have them ask about your work habits, your work ethics. Then have that friend report back to you and answer one simple question: should I use them or should I not use them? Don't ask them what they said about you. And the reason being is that if the person were to say something negative about you, you might lose that relationship. And that relationship right now is in a good place because they agreed to be used as a reference. So they obviously would give you a job lead if they knew one that was out there. So simply ask them, should I use them or not? The next section is on educational data. You need to list the high school that you graduated from. And if you didn't graduate from high school but you earned a GED, put down the GED, or at least the highest grade you completed, along with any vocational trades that you learned from any school. And list your graduation date if you've graduated from those schools or programs. List the school name and the address of the high school you attended. Any vocational trade schools that you've attended, list their names and address. Also, list the training that you received there, any certificates that you've earned. If you're in college or have finished college, list the name and address of the college that you've attended. List any type of a degree or course of study that you've taken. If you've earned credit hours just in general studies, put credit hours in general studies. And remember this: a lot of employers are going to ask you for a transcript. There are 2 types of transcripts. There's the official transcript, and the official transcript generally costs money because it has a seal from the college attesting to the fact that it is an official bona fide transcript. There are also unofficial transcripts that are generally available from a school for little to no money. So if an employer is asking for a transcript, ask them what type. I have a lot of clients who I go ahead and tell them, go ahead and get your unofficial transcript if it doesn't cost you anything, and have it on hand so that you can speed up the process of getting a job. Homework. Please email me, Tim Buchanan, at timothy.buchan at DARS, DARS, .virginia, virginia.gov, a copy of your master application by Friday. It will give me a great understanding of where you are in the process of becoming employed.
Ah, the resume. This simple sheet of paper, for better or for worse, is your primary tool when it comes time to getting a job. It's pretty scary. The other scary part is that the recruiting directors deciding your fate are only going to spend about 10 seconds looking at your resume, and they're comparing you against dozens and sometimes hundreds of other students. So what can you do to make sure your resume doesn't get tossed into the scrap heap? Well, there's some serious mistakes that students make over and over again that ruin their chances. Trust me, I know. Typos. Who would send a resume out with a typo on it? A lot of people, actually. In fact, it's estimated that 20% of student resumes have typos on them. Now, I know what you're thinking. No worries for me, I don't have a typo on my resume. Well, that's what everyone thinks. I mean, no one would send a resume out knowing they have a typo on it, would they? I remember picking up a resume of a student who was very proud of his managerial skills. In fact, he was responsible for running a team of 8 employees. Yet when I looked at his resume, it said, responsible for ruining a team of 8 employees. Now, it's just one letter, and of course, spell check wouldn't catch it. I don't know about you, though. I wouldn't want to hire a guy who just ruined a team of 8 employees. Before you ever send your resume out, you need to make sure at least 2 other people proofread it. Hey. I know an even better place to start. How about the Career Center? Do you think they might have some folks who'd be more than happy to look at your resume and give you all sorts of advice? Of course they do. Writing style. Resumes need to be easy to read. The fact is, most of us in the real world don't have time to read. The best way to format your resume is using bullet points. There should be no sentences on your resume, so there's no need for any periods. Make sure you remove all first person. I don't want to see the words I, we, me, or our on your resume. And finally, make sure you start all those bullet points with action verbs, and don't repeat those action verbs. Do you know what the Lisa Janet Szabo Honorary Scholarship is? Neither do I. Not everybody went to your school. Not everybody was in the same extracurriculars. You need to make sure that you explain it to the recruiting director. So for all I know, the LJZHS is awarded to 1 student out of 1,000 based on outstanding academics, leadership, and commitment. Or for all I know, your grandmother is Lisa Janet Szabo, and she gave you $50 to buy pizza one day. I have no idea. Explain, in one brief phrase, what it is. Otherwise, the reader will assume it's worthless. Multi-page resumes. I don't care how amazing, active, or accomplished you are. You must get your business resume onto 1 page. If someone's only spending 10 or 15 seconds looking at it, I doubt they're going to be excited about seeing GPA 3.42689. We don't need your GPA carried out to the 10,000th percentile. Your GPA should be 3.1 numbered. You're going to round up or down according to the laws of mathematics. So in this case, your GPA should be listed as 3.4. So there you have it. Resume mistakes that students make over and over again. Make sure you avoid these and you'll definitely improve your chances of landing a job. Good luck.
let's talk about how to use a resume real quick. The best way I found to use a resume is to think of it not as a work history, but to think of it as a sales brochure, because that's what you're doing. You're selling your skills, your education, and your experience to the employer. So what the resume really is it is a conversation piece. It's a segue to lead to the interview, to give you something to talk about when you're talking to an employer. One of the things that I always tell all my clients is never hand your resume to an employer without first talking about your experiences you have and how it relates to the potential employer. So in other words, if I'm going for a job that is a sales job, I'm going to point to sales jobs I've held in the past and say, I've had experience selling at this place, this place, this place. If I were to be a dog groomer and I were to go to a PetSmart, I would point out places that I've done grooming on animals for, or maybe even on a farm, how I work with animals. Because it is a sales brochure that you can talk about to the employer about your skills and how you can help the employer with their problem. That's why they're hiring you, is to solve their problem. So always focus on what you can do for them. A resume is very, very similar to the master application. Remember, it is a sales brochure to help you talk to the employer about your experiences. The first thing that you want at the top of the resume is your contact information, how that employer can get a hold of you to hopefully line up an interview for the job. The next section of a resume could be a skills section that highlights the specialized skills that you bring to the employer that the employer is looking for. The next section after that is the employment history. And on that employment history, you list the from and to dates, the name of the employer, and a list of tasks or skills that you used at that employer. Don't worry, if you don't have an employment history to put down, try volunteering someplace. After all, the only difference between volunteering and employment is a paycheck. So you can list a volunteer experience down just like you would a job. You just need to make sure that you use the word volunteer beside the title of the job. List down your education experience, just like we had on the master application. List any activities that are relevant to the employer that you're going to be applying to. And don't forget to put down 3 references. Use the references that we had in the master application. If you do that and you follow this order, you can create a resume that will help sell yourself to an employer and get a job. Are you still worried about creating a resume? Well, don't be. There is an easy to use website that will help you create one. If you've got a pen and paper handy, write down this web address. It's www.gcflearnfree.org, O-R-G. www.gcflearnfree.org. And on that website, they have different modules that guide you step by step to create a resume. When you finish each module, at the very end, the last module, it will create a complete resume for you that you can use with an employer.
Let's start with a personal story. Way back in the spring of 2006, we were looking to hire an intern at our company. As the candidate was coming to interview, I went on Facebook to check him out. I was on Facebook back then. I know, I'm pretty cool. As I checked out Jack's profile, he listed some of his interests as smoking blunts with the homies, busting caps into whitey, and a bunch of other things that I'm actually not at liberty to say on this video. Now, did I think Jack was joking when he wrote that? Of course. I'm fairly confident he wasn't out killing people. But what did it say about his maturity, his professionalism, and his judgment? Not a lot. Here's the deal. Making the hiring decision is a difficult and incredibly important process. Going into the job search, an employer wants to have as much information as they can about an employee. Remember, they're sinking lots of time and tons of money into that hiring decision. Employers and hiring managers expect you to put your best foot forward in a resume, during an interview, and even in your online profile. It's estimated that 75% of employers are using Facebook, MySpace, and other online screening tools. If they find something that's out of place in any of the above, it can ruin your chances of getting a job. Now, some folks have argued that a person's private life shouldn't matter when it comes to the job search. So maybe you enjoy a little too much partying, but it's on your own time. Students especially take issue with people prying into their personal lives. Hey, we're not naive. We're not expecting everybody to be perfect. But in reality, your online profile can tell an employer a lot about your professionalism and your judgment. The fact that you think it's acceptable to post pictures of your inappropriate late-night escapades in a public forum says that you have poor judgment. And that's not what potential employers are looking for. You may think it's unfair, or you may think it's a double standard, but the reality is that employers are checking out your online profile, and they're making decisions based on what they find. I'm not here to tell you what you should or should not do. I'm not here to tell you what you should or should not take pictures of. But what I am here to say is if you ever expect to get a job or an internship, do not post that stuff on the World Wide Web. If there's any question as to what is or is not appropriate, check with your Career Center. Believe me, they've seen it all. Oh, and one final thought. I won't get into all the details now, but don't think you're okay just because you use your privacy settings. There are ways around it. Trust me. Good luck.
Homework. Please email me, Tim Buchanan, a copy of your resume that you've created from today's session. Please email me at Timothy, Timothy, .Buchanan, Buchanan, at DARS, DARS, .Virginia, VIRGINIA.gov. Thank you.